Greetings to those who are hopeful and to those that need hope. I need hope that my phone won't go off for the third time. I've recorded this over and over again, and every single time I turn down the volume to one thing, another thing goes off. I turn down the volume to it, the email buzzer goes off. I turn down the volume to it, the instant messenger goes off. I'm about to throw it against a wall, and my life will probably be better for it. I do believe this is Android, which means they know all I'm doing. What a wonderful chapter we have today. I feel that this chapter captures the heart of many Christians in this time through which we are living. The whole world seems upside down. The whole world seems divided, and it is. Along with the great trials and troubles of the world, many of us are suffering through problems closer to home, like having to be tied to a cell phone. I haven't had a good night's sleep in months. I wake up at night thinking about the problems of the world and the problems a little closer to home. I'm sure you would all agree that there is enough ignorance and evil and problems to go around. Even if you think I'm the ignorant one, doesn't matter. Truth is truth. And this I know. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. The politically correct language that has been force-fed to us has kept us from speaking the truth for a good 20, 30 years at least, longer than that probably, but we're in full swing now. And when you are intimidated into ignoring the teachings of Christ or of not speaking the truth, when you are talked into or forced to ignore the promptings of the Spirit, to ignore the simplistic correction that we receive from our own broken consciences, your soul dies 1,000 deaths until you become a ghost living among the dead. You become what is known as Ketman. You become blind being led by blind. Like Winston from 1984, if you lie to yourself long enough, even under torture, 2 plus 2 can indeed equal 5 in a world of lies. We have a ministry of war that is called the Department of Defense. Winston worked for the Ministry of Information. His job? To destroy information. Even if we look to our neighbors in the north, Maryland issues its EBT or its welfare cards under the name of Independence Card. A card that by all logical assessments, and I'm not saying this to be mean, this is the truth. And it's one of the truths we've been told to hush about. A card that by all logical assessments indicates that you are unable to support yourself for now and that you are dependent on the hand that feeds you. And they call it the Independence Card. Doesn't that feel good? The list could go on. Boy, the devil likes to lie, and so does the devil's children. Whenever I name a ministry at the church, I try to think of something biblical. Years ago, I was putting together a men's group, which I intended to call The Remnant. I liked it. If I saw that, I'd want to join. Romans 11:5 says, "So too, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace." And Matthew 7:14 says, "But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." The fellow that was working with me didn't like the name at all. He said it was depressing, and that it sounded as though there were only a few of us. I thought, yep. Just like Jesus said. But it is not good advertising to a worldly mind. It is not seeker-sensitive enough. It is not a call to cheap grace. Instead, we have a call to the most costly path imaginable. For to gain the world is to lose the soul, but to lose the world is to gain it. To veer one way or the other is to fall off the path, which is by nature narrow. G.K. Chesterton once wrote, "It is always simple to fall. There are an infinity of angles at which one falls, only one at which one stands. To have fallen into any one of the fads from Gnosticism to Christian Science would indeed have been obvious and tame or boring. But to have avoided them all has been one whirling adventure. And in my vision the heavenly chariots flies thundering through the ages, the dull heresy sprawling and prostrate, the wild truth reeling but erect." Today's lesson has our pilgrims fall from the straight and narrow path. They find a path that looks as though it runs parallel and by all appearances looks like a much more welcoming road. Sadly for our heroes, the road is the road of salvation through works, and the destination is the castle of doubting, or doubting castle. In the castle lives a giant named Despair. Folks, I have felt despair in the last couple of years. How about you? I have felt despair in the last couple of years unlike anything I have experienced in my life. We have all had times of feeling despair, especially in a seemingly hopeless situation or during a time of great loss, but this is the first time I have despaired of the whole world. The sorcerers of Egypt and the builders of Babel have been active for the entire history of the world, and I am seeing it more clearly than I have ever desired to see it. Christianity is not a Gnostic religion, which means that salvation is not dependent on some magical intellect or some secret knowledge. It is dependent on the knowledge of Jesus Christ and Christ only. But that doesn't mean that there are not things which are hidden in this world, things that are drawing their plans against us. If you are really following Christ and studying the Scriptures, God is now, in this moment, renewing your mind. And God help us, we need our minds renewed because we have been altered. And when He renews your mind, you will start noticing that nothing is really hidden. Your eyes have been blinded, we see through a glass darkly, and your mind has been numbed or put to sleep, lulled into inaction. But once Christ becomes the light that illuminates your path, you begin to realize that the devil has been anything but covert. He has been the thimble that hides in plain sight all these centuries. It is too grotesque to stare at, and so we turn our head and try to ignore it. And it is too sanity-shaking to absorb all at one time. But once the wise of this world have allowed Christ to shine in the darkness, it becomes all too apparent that we too have been complicit in the sin of Adam and the corruption of creation itself. Romans 8:19-22 says it this way: "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." Now, other than the Bible scriptures, what I just spoke to you is kind of depressing stuff, despair and doubt. Let us get to the promises of the King. For it is the promise that allows our heroes to escape despair and to escape doubt. Praise be to the King of Kings and my Savior Jesus Christ, who not only reveals the truth that is all around us and wakes us up from our slumber, but promises that He will provide a way and that He will be with us unto the ends of the earth. Are you in despair today? Then cling to the truth of Jesus Christ. Today's reading will not only show you the way out, but it will also let you know that what you are experiencing is not unique to you. You are not alone. Others have been there, some to destruction, but some clung to the robe of Christ, and we slaves of Jesus will ride His coattails into glory. In the letter to the Corinthians, Paul writes these words: "These things happened to them as examples, and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come." Are you hearing this? So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you do not fall. No temptation is overtaking you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. What a wonderful promise, especially in these days. Let's turn to chapter 15 in Pilgrim's Progress and receive the good news that Bunyan has for us through Jesus Christ our Lord. Chapter 15. "I saw then that they went on their way to a pleasant river, which David the king called the river of God. But John, the river of the water of life. Now, their way lay just upon the bank of this river. Here, therefore, Christian and his companion walked with great delight. They drank also of the water of the river, which was pleasant and enlivening to their weary spirits. Besides, on the bank of this river, on either side, were green trees that bore all manner of fruit, and the leaves of the trees were good for medicine. With the fruit of these trees they were also much delighted, and the leaves they ate to prevent surfeits, and other diseases that are incident to those that heat their blood by travel. On either side of the river was also a meadow curiously beautified with lilies, and it was green all year long. In this meadow they lay down and slept, for here they might lie down safely. When they awoke, they gathered again of the fruit of the trees, and drank again of the water of the river, and then lay down again to sleep. Thus they did several days and nights. Then they sang, Behold ye how these crystal streams do glide to comfort pilgrims by the highway side. The meadows green, besides their fragrant smell, yield dainties for them, and he that can tell what pleasing fruit, yea, leaves these trees do yield, will soon sell all, that he may buy this field. So, when they were disposed to go on, for they were not as yet at their journey's end, they ate and drank and departed. Now I beheld in my dream that they had not journeyed far, but the river and the way for a time parted, at which they were not a little sorry. Yet they durst not go out of the way. Now the way from the river was rough, and their feet tender by reason of their travels, so the souls of the pilgrims were much discouraged because of the way. Wherefore, still as they went on, they wished for a better way. Now, a little before them, there was on the left hand of the road a meadow and a stile to go over into it, and that meadow is called Bypath Meadow. Then said Christian to his fellow, If this meadow lieth along by our wayside, let us go over into it. Then he went to the stile to see, and behold, a path lay along by the way on the other side of the fence. It is according to my wish, said Christian. Here is the easiest going. Come, good hopeful, and let us go over. But how if this path should lead us out of the way? That is not likely, said the other. Look, doth it not go along by the wayside? So Hopeful, being persuaded by his fellow, went after him over the stile. When they were gone over and were got into the path, they found it very easy for their feet, and withal they, looking before them, espied a man walking as they did, and his name was Vain Confidence. So they called after him and asked him whither that way led. He said, To the celestial gate. Look, said Christian, did I not tell you so? By this you may see we are right. So they followed, and he went before them. But behold, the night came on, and it grew very dark, so that they that were behind lost sight of him that went before. He, therefore, that went before, Vain Confidence by name, not seeing the way before him, fell into a deep pit, which was on purpose there made by the prince of those grounds, to catch vainglorious fools withal, and was dashed in pieces with his fall. Now Christian and his fellow heard him fall. So they called to know the matter, but there was none to answer. Only they heard a groaning. Then said Hopeful, Where are we now? Then was his fellow silent, as mistrusting that he had led him out of the way. And now it began to rain, and thunder, and lighten, and in a very dreadful manner, and the water rose amain. Then Hopeful groaned within himself, saying, Oh, that I had kept on my way! Who could have thought that this path should have led us out of the way? I was afraid on't at the very first, and therefore gave you that gentle caution. I would have spoken plainer, but that you are older than I. Good brother, be not offended. I am sorry I have brought thee out of the way, and that I have put thee into such imminent danger. Pray, my brother, forgive me. I did not do it of an evil intent. Be comforted, my brother, for I forgive thee. And believe, too, that this shall be for our good. I'm glad I have with me a merciful brother, but we must not stand here. Let us try to go back again. But, good brother, let me go before. No, if you please, let me go first, that if there be any danger, I may be first therein, because by my means we are both gone out of the way. No, said Hopeful, you shall not go first, for your mind, being troubled, may lead you out of the way again. Then, For their encouragement, they heard the voice of one saying, Set thine heart towards the highway, even the way which thou wentest, turn again. But by this time the waters were greatly risen, by reason of which the way of going back was very dangerous. Then I thought that it is easier going out of the way when we are in than going in when we are out. Yet they had ventured to go back, but it was so dark and the flood was so high that in their going back they had like to have been drowned 9 or 10 times. Neither could they, with all the skill they had, get again to the stile that night. Wherefore at last, lighting under a little shelter, they sat down there till daybreak. But being weary, they fell asleep. Now, there was not far from this a castle called Doubting Castle. The owner whereof was Giant Despair. And it was in his grounds they now were sleeping. Wherefore he, getting up in the morning early and walking up and down in his fields, caught Christian and Hopeful asleep in his grounds. Then, with a grim and surly voice, he bade them awake and asked them whence they were and what they did in his grounds. They told him they were pilgrims and that they had lost their way. Then said the giant, You have this night trespassed on me by trampling in and lying on my grounds, and therefore you must go along with me. So they were forced to go, because he was stronger than they. They also had but little to say, for they knew themselves in fault. The giant therefore drove them before him and put them into his castle, into a very dark dungeon, nasty and stinking to the spirits of these 2 men. Here then they lay from Wednesday morning till Saturday night, without one bit of bread or drop of drink or light or any to ask how they did. They were therefore here in evil case, and were far from friends and acquaintance. Now in this place Christian had double sorrow, because it was through his unadvised counsel that they were brought into this distress. Now, Giant Despair had a wife, and her name was Diffidence. So when he was gone to bed, he told his wife what he had done, to wit, that he had taken a couple of prisoners and cast them into his dungeon for trespassing on his grounds. Then he asked her also what he had best do further with them. So she asked him what they were, whence they came, and whither they were bound. And he told her. Then she counseled him that as soon as he arose in the morning, he should beat them both without mercy. So when he arose, he getteth him a grievous crab-tree cudgel, and goes down into the dungeon to them, and there first falls to rating of them as if they were dogs, although they gave him never a word of distaste. Then he falls upon them, and beat them fearfully, in such sort that they were not able to help themselves, or to turn them upon the floor. This done, he withdraws, and leaves them there to condole their misery, and to mourn under their distress. So all that day they spent their time in nothing but sighs and bitter lamentations. The next night she, talking with her husband further about them, and understanding that they were yet alive, did advise him to counsel them to make away with themselves. So when the morning was come, he goes to them in a surly manner as before, and perceiving them to be very sore with the stripes that he had given them the day before, he told them that since they were never like to come out of that place, their only way would be forthwith to make an end of themselves, either with knife, halter, or poison. For why, said he, should you choose to live, seeing it is attended with so much bitterness? But they desired him to let them go. With that he looked ugly upon them, and rushing to them, had doubtless made an end of them himself, but that he fell into one of his fits, for he sometimes in sunshiny weather fell into fits, and lost for a time the use of his hands. Wherefore he withdrew and left them as before to consider what to do. Then did the prisoners consult between themselves whether it was best to take his counsel or no, and thus they began to discourse. Brother, said Christian, what shall we do? The life that we now live is miserable. For my part, I know not whether it is best to live thus or to die out of hand. My soul chooseth strangling rather than life, and the grave is more easy for me than this dungeon. Shall we be ruled by the giant? Indeed, our present condition is dreadful, and death would be far more welcome to me than thus forever to abide. But yet let us consider the Lord of the country to which we are going hath said, Thou shalt do no murder. No, not to another man's person? Much more then are we forbidden to take his counsel to kill ourselves. Besides, he that kills another can but commit murder upon his body. But for one to kill himself is to kill body and soul at once. And moreover, my brother, thou talkest of ease in the grave, but hast thou forgotten the hell whither for certain the murderers go? For no murderer hath eternal life, etc. And let us consider again that all the law is not in the hand of giant Despair. Others, so far as I can understand, have been taken by him as well as we, and yet have escaped out of his hands. Who knows but that God, who made the world, may cause that giant Despair may die, or that at some time or other he may forget to lock us in, or that he may in a short time have another of his fits before us, and may lose the use of his limbs. And if ever that should come to pass again, for my part, I am resolved to pluck up the heart of a man, and to try my utmost to get from under his hand. I was a fool that I did not try to do it before. But, however, my brother, let us be patient, and endure a while. The time may come that may give us a happy release, but let us not be our own murderers. With these words, Hopeful at present did moderate the mind of his brother, and so they continued together in the dark that day in their sad and doleful condition. Well, towards evening the giant goes down into the dungeon again to see if his prisoners had taken his counsel. But when he came there, he found them alive, and truly alive was all. For now, what for want of bread and water, and by reason of the wounds they received when he beat them, they could do little but breathe. But I say he found them alive, at which he fell into a grievous rage, and told them that seeing they had disobeyed his counsel, it should be worse with them than if they had never been born. At this they trembled greatly, and I think that Christian fell into a swoon, but coming a little to himself again. Pardon me. At this they trembled greatly, and I think that Christian fell into a swoon. But coming a little to himself again, they renewed their discourse about the giant's counsel, and whether yet they had best take it or no. Now Christian again seemed for doing it, but Hopeful made his second reply as followeth. My brother, said he, rememberest thou not how valiant thou hast been heretofore? Apollyon could not crush thee, nor could all that thou didst hear or see or feel in the valley of the shadow of death. What hardship, terror, and amazement hast thou already gone through, and art thou now nothing but fierce? Thou seest that I am in the dungeon with thee, a far weaker man by nature than thou art. Also this giant hath wounded me as well as thee, and hath cut off the bread and water from my mouth, and with thee I mourn without the light. But lest us exercise a little more patience. Remember how thou playedst the man at Vanity Fair, and wast neither afraid of the chain, nor cage, nor yet of bloody death. Wherefore let us at least to avoid the shame that becomes not a Christian to be found in, bear up with patience as well as we can. Now, night being come again, and the giant and his wife being in bed, she asked him concerning the prisoners, and if they had taken his counsel. To which he replied, They are sturdy rogues. They choose rather to bear all hardships than to make away with themselves. Then said she, Take them into the castle yard tomorrow, and show them the bones and skulls of those that thou hast already dispatched, and make them believe, ere a week come to an end, thou wilt tear them in pieces as thou hast done their fellows before them. So when the morning was come, the giant goes to them again, and takes them into the castle yard, and shows them as his wife had bidden him. These, said he, were pilgrims as you are once, and they trespassed on my grounds as you have done. And when I thought fit, I tore them in pieces, and so within 10 days I will do you. Go, get your down to your den again. And with that he beat them all the way thither. They lay therefore all day on Saturday in lamentable cases before. Now, when night was come, and when Mrs. Diffidence and her husband the giant were got to bed, they began to renew their discourse of their prisoners. And withal the old giant wondered that he could neither by his blows nor counsel bring them to an end. And with that his wife replied, I fear, said she, that they live in hopes that some will come and relieve them, or that they have picklocks about them, by the means of which they hope to escape. And sayest thou so, my dear, said the giant, I will therefore search them in the morning. Well, on Saturday, about midnight, they began to pray, and continued in prayer till almost break of day. Now, a little before it was day, good Christian, as one half amazed, brake out into this passionate speech. What a fool, quoth he, am I thus to lie in a stinking dungeon, when I may as well walk at liberty? I have a key in my bosom called Promise, that will, I am persuaded, open any lock in Doubting Castle. Then said Hopeful, that is good news. Good brother, pluck it out of thy bosom, and try. Then Christian pulled it out of his bosom, and began to try at the dungeon door, whose bolt, as he turned the key, gave back, and the door flew open with ease, and Christian and Hopeful both came out. Then he went to the outward door that leads into the castle yard, and with his key opened that door also. After that he went to the iron gate, for that must be open too, but that lock went damnable hard, yet the key did open it. Then they thrust open the gate to make their escape with speed, but that gate as it opened made such a creaking that it waked Giant Despair, who hastily rising to pursue his prisoners felt his limbs to fail, for his fits took him again, so that he could by no means go after them. Then they went on and came to the king's highway, and so were safe, because they were out of his jurisdiction. Now, when they were gone over the stile, they began to contrive with themselves what they should do at that stile, to prevent those that should come after from falling into the hands of Giant Despair. So they consented to erect there a pillar, and to engrave upon the side thereof this sentence, Over this stile is the way to Doubting Castle, which is kept by Giant Despair, who despiseth the king of the celestial country, and seeks to destroy his holy pilgrims. Many therefore that followed after read what was written, and escaped the danger. This done, they sang as follows. Out of the way we went, and then we found what 'twas to tread upon forbidden ground. And let them that come after have a care, lest heedlessness makes them as we to fare. Lest they for trespassing his prisoners are, whose castle doubting, and whose name Despair. I wanted to read one of the footnotes during the main reading, but when I tried it, it interrupted the flow of the narrative too much for my taste. So I want to read that footnote that Bunyan has added to this particular reading to you today or tonight, whenever you're watching this. And I hope you'll find it as encouraging as I do. What? Pray in custody of Giant Despair in the midst of Doubting Castle, and when their own folly brought them thereto? Yes, mind this, ye pilgrims, ye are exhorted. I will that men pray everywhere, without doubting. 1 Timothy 2:8. We can be in no place but God can hear, nor in any circumstances from which God is not able to deliver us. And be assured, when the spirit of prayer comes, deliverance is nigh at hand. So it was here. Precious promise, the promise of God in Christ, are the very life of faith. Oh, how oft do we neglect God's great and precious promises in Christ Jesus, while doubts and despairs keep us prisoner. So it was with these pilgrims. They were kept under hard bondage of soul for 4 days. Hence, see what it is to grieve the Spirit of God and dread it, for He only is the Comforter, and if He withdraw His influences, who or what can comfort us? Though precious promises are revealed in the Word, yet we can get no comfort from them, but by the grace of the Spirit. Godspeed, ye remnants of Christ.